In the year 180 AD, the death of Marcus Aurelius marked the end of Rome's golden age. The philosopher king, revered for his stoic wisdom and dedication to the empire, had spent his reign safeguarding Rome's borders and upholding its traditions. His death left the throne to his son, Commodus, a man whose name would become synonymous with excess, corruption, and chaos. Where Marcus Aurelius ruled with duty and discipline, Commodus would rule with indulgence and vanity, unraveling much of what his father had built. Commodus was born into privilege in 161 AD, the youngest male heir of Marcus Aurelius and Faustina the Younger. His early life was one of extraordinary luxury, surrounded by the splendor of the imperial court and shielded from the struggles that had forged his father's character. Unlike Marcus Aurelius, who rose to greatness through resilience and intellect, Commodus knew only the comforts of power. He was tutored by the finest minds of the time, but the lessons of philosophy, governance, and strategy fell on deaf ears. Commodus lacked the curiosity and discipline of his father, preferring the pleasures of the palace to the rigors of learning. At just 15 years old, Commodus was elevated to co-emperor alongside Marcus Aurelius, a move that broke Rome's tradition of adopting the most capable successor. The decision was controversial. Many questioned whether the young prince, untested and uninterested in matters of state, could shoulder the immense responsibilities of rule. But Marcus Aurelius, perhaps driven by a father's love, was determined to secure his son's place on the throne. He brought Commodus to the front lines of the brutal campaigns against the Germanic tribes, hoping to temper the boy's character through exposure to the harsh realities of leadership. But Commodus did not share his father's appetite for war. While Marcus Aurelius endured the mud, cold, and unrelenting pressure of the battlefield, Commodus yearned for the luxuries of Rome. The barbarian frontier held no allure for him. He resented the harsh conditions and longed to escape the weight of imperial duty. When Marcus Aurelius died, some whispered of foul play, suggesting that Commodus might have hastened the philosopher king's end. Whether or not the rumors were true, Commodus wasted no time abandoning the Danube campaigns and returning to the capital, leaving his father's hard-fought victories unfinished. With his return to Rome, Commodus stepped into the role of sole emperor, but his vision for leadership was vastly different from his father's. While Marcus Aurelius had viewed power as a responsibility, Commodus saw it as an opportunity for personal indulgence. When Commodus ascended the throne, he sought to distinguish himself, not as a ruler bound by duty, but as a god among men, a figure whose grandeur would eclipse all others. Declaring himself the reincarnation of Hercules, the mighty hero of legend, Commodus embraced a divine persona. Draped in a lion's skin and wielding a massive club, he paraded through the streets of Rome, ordering statues and coins to immortalize him as Hercules Reborn, the divine protector of the empire. This was no mere vanity. It was a declaration that he was above the mortal constraints of his predecessors, a living god who demanded not just respect, but worship. Yet, while Commodus fashioned himself as a god, he turned his back on the responsibilities of an emperor. The wars on Rome's frontiers, hard fought by his father to secure the empire's borders, were abandoned. Commodus saw little value in the exhausting campaigns that had defined Marcus Aurelius's reign. Instead, he sought peace through bribes and treaties, empty gestures that temporarily quieted Rome's enemies but left its defenses weakened. As the legions grew restless and Rome's enemies gathered strength, Commodus remained blissfully detached, indulging in his passions while the empire's foundation began to crack. Commodus's indulgence came at a steep cost. He surrounded himself with flatterers and sycophants, men who pandered to his whims and told him only what he wished to hear. Gladiators and entertainers replaced statesmen and generals in his inner circle. The Senate, once a cornerstone of Roman governance, was cast aside, its members dismissed or humiliated. Rome's elite, alienated by the emperor's behavior, watched with growing horror as Commodus transformed the imperial court into a playground for corruption. Positions of power were bought and sold, decisions were made on a whim, and the machinery of empire ground to a halt under the weight of his neglect. Meanwhile, Commodus descended deeper into decadence. His obsession with the arena became the defining spectacle of his reign. Hosting lavish games that drained the treasury, he turned Rome's gladiatorial combats into grand showcases of his imagined might. To the horror of the Roman populace, Commodus himself took to the arena, not as a spectator, but as a participant. Though his fights were carefully staged to ensure his victory, the sight of the emperor degrading himself in the blood-soaked sands appalled citizens and senators alike. For Romans, the arena was a place for slaves and criminals, not for the leader of the greatest empire in the world. Yet Commodus reveled in the spectacle. He counted his victories in the arena as proof of his divine strength, boasting of having slain beasts and defeated gladiators in combat. The crowds were compelled to cheer, but behind their applause was unease. To many, the image of their emperor, dressed as Hercules and basking in the glory of his mock conquests, symbolized the decay of the office that had once been the pinnacle of Roman dignity. For Commodus, it was a performance of power, and for Rome, the beginning of the end. Commodus was lapsing into insanity. He gave Rome a new name, Colonia Commodiana, meaning the colony of Commodus. This warranted his advisors to take action for the sake of Rome. So on December 31st, 192, his advisors had him strangled by a champion wrestler, Narcissus, following his announcement the day before that he would assume the consulship, dressed as a gladiator. The death of Commodus marked the dramatic conclusion of the Nerva Antonine dynasty, a lineage once celebrated for its stability, wisdom, and the prosperity it brought to Rome. Under emperors like Trajan, Hadrian, and Marcus Aurelius, the empire had flourished, its borders expanding and its people thriving under a relatively just administration. But with Commodus's ascension, the Golden Age came crashing down, replaced by decadence, fear, and chaos. The sudden vacuum left by Commodus's assassination plunged Rome into a dangerous period of instability and civil war, a tumult that would later be called the Year of the Five Emperors. Without a clear successor, Rome became a battleground for generals, politicians, and opportunists vying for power. The Praetorian Guard, once the empire's protectors, descended into corruption, selling the imperial throne to the highest bidder. Factions formed, alliances shattered, and blood was spilled in the Senate, on the streets, and across the provinces. The very foundations of Rome seemed to quake under the weight of the chaos Commodus had left behind. Commodus's reign is a cautionary tale of what happens when power is wielded by the unworthy. He sought immortality, to be remembered as a god among men. Instead, he left behind a legacy of ruin, his name etched in history not as a savior of Rome, but as one of its most infamous tyrants.